All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Frictionless Distributor Sales Enablement webinar. Very excited to have everybody on the webinar this morning. We only have about 30 minutes to do this, and so I'm going to get started. But I did just want to have a shout out to those of you who were down at ConExpo Con Ag last week. That was really a great show, record-setting numbers of attendees. It was incredible. Impossible to see the entire show, but wow, what was down there was pretty amazing. So let's get right into this. Just based on conversations that I had with well over 100 different companies, manufacturers down there, visiting their booths, talking to them about their dealer and distributor networks, it became obvious that there is a lot of friction in these distribution channels, in these distributor and dealer relationships. And so this morning, in just under a half hour, what we are going to look at is we're going to look at some of the sources of the friction that manufacturers are experiencing with their channels and start to unpack a little bit of what can we do about it, because ultimately that's what we're trying to get to, is a productive answer or solution to some of the friction that's going on today. Now, I am going to be drawing a lot today. I do have some visuals that will help me, but mostly I'll be drawing. And so where do we start? Where do we start in this whole conversation? I think that the right place for us to start, and let me just make sure that I have my tools here, is at the end. So what we're trying to do with distributor sales enablement is prepare our dealers and distributors for one very specific thing. And that is the conversation that they are going to be having with the buyer, or potentially an existing customer who's maybe going to be a repeat buyer, could be an account. And over here we have the, let's just call this individual the rep. And so this is what it's all about. It's this conversation that we need to try to optimize, maximize, just make as good as we possibly can. But there's a lot of reasons that it doesn't happen, and there's a lot of symptoms that it's not happening well. We may look at the ideal situation between a rep and a buyer and say, well, what is the perfect interaction between them? Well, maybe we would like to think that the rep is an expert, right? Really knows the product, knows the industry, is very experienced. Maybe the buyer who's coming in with questions gets those questions answered quickly, effectively, authoritatively. Maybe the rep is able to actually offer insights into the business of the buyer, right? Things that the buyer didn't know about what's going on in their unique situation. Ultimately providing a solution, right? A recommendation of a purchase that is exactly in line with what the buyer needs. So, and then at the end of this conversation, which first of all is going to happen as quickly as it can, right? We don't want to be dragged out over weeks, a lot of Q&A. Oh, I don't have the answer to that. Let me get back to you and all that kind of thing, because we know that buyers get really frustrated by elongated selling cycles, right? So we want it to be time efficient, cost efficient, and we want the rep to be delivering good information to the buyer. So is this happening today? No, it's not, at least not very much. How do we know that? Well, one of the questions that I ask manufacturers pretty commonly, because it's become a bit of a benchmark, is what percentage of your distributors do you consider to be high performing? And just about the typical answer that I get is somewhere between, somewhere around 15%. That's about pretty typical. Occasionally I might hear something a little bit higher, maybe 20%. Yeah, 20% of my dealers are high performing. I consider that actually to be a pretty high number based on what I've heard. I hear 10%. That's actually a pretty common answer. 10% of my distribution network is high performing. I've certainly heard single digits, and I really feel for the manufacturers who have told me 1%. 1% of the distributor network is high performing. So this is just tough stuff, because if, let's say 10%, pretty common answer, of your distributor network is high performing, 90% then are not. That means that any buyer who comes in and talks to those 90% is not going to have a good experience. And ultimately that extends to your brand, right? That's part of the buying experience, and part of the way that they experience a brand touch point with you is through your distribution network. And so we have to be careful when we look at, wow, what percentage of these people are not performing the right way, because it reflects on your brand, and it can leave a really sour taste with your buyers, and that's a big part of your brand. So let's unwind this a little bit and see what we can figure out here. So why are so many of the distributors not high performing, right? Why are they just not? Well, in order to understand that a little bit better, we got to take a look at the knowledge level of the rep and the buyer, okay? And we're going to say there's basically 3 different knowledge levels that the rep and the buyer can have. So we're going to say, kind of down here, we're just going to generally say there's like a low knowledge level, don't really know too much about the product. Maybe this person's new, or maybe they just, aren't familiarized. Kind of a medium level. And then let's go up here and say there's a high level of knowledge. So typically what happens with most buyers today is they're coming in with kind of a medium level of knowledge. Now, this is tending to go up over time. It has been for years. Buyers have a lot more resources. They can look online to research products, find out information, pricing, features, benefits, things like that. They do a lot of their buying process before they even go and talk to anybody in sales. And so usually they're pretty medium informed if we're just talking about, what they know. Occasionally you might have somebody who really, really knows the product well, or maybe knows it a little bit less well. But in general, for the most part, what we're saying is that they are kind of here. They're kind of here in the middle. So there's really kind of 3 places that the rep can be, and this is going to dictate the tone and tenor of the conversation between the rep and the buyer. And so unfortunately, the most common place where the rep is down here in kind of the low territory. That's why so many of these are low performing, is because they just don't know the product very well. They certainly don't know it well enough to be able to keep up with an informed buyer. And so that puts them on their heels. And that creates a very negative dynamic where the buyer knows more than the rep. And so this creates the problem of the order taker, right? So when the rep knows less than the buyer, they kind of get backed up and they get into this mode of, oh, hey, I'm just gonna, make the order or take the order, get out the order form. There's not really anything I can add to this. They're not feeling confident, and they just say, hey, you know what you want, buyer. We're gonna go ahead and take the order. Now, if the rep has more of a moderate level of knowledge, him or herself, right? Then what we're going to see is we're going to see more of a kind of equivalent standing, right? Buyer knows a fair amount, dealer rep, distributor rep knows a fair amount, and so they're able to communicate fairly well. There's going to be more back and forth. There's going to be more ability to answer questions. It's just going to generally feel more like more like something that we would call a almost we would call this like peers, right? 2 people who both know a fair amount, talking about it and getting to where they need to go. More questions get answered. It's a little bit of a better experience, and they're kind of on an equal footing. Certainly, this is better than the order taker situation where the rep knows less than the buyer. But now let's go to the final possibility, which is that the rep has a high level of product knowledge, a lot of possibly industry experience, understanding of how products apply, to applications, use cases, different ways. The ability to really deliver those insights to the buyer through various mechanisms. Hey, here's what I'm hearing. Here are some things that are going on with your business. And that is when we get into what is the most desirable mode here. And that's what we would call the expert, right? When the rep is able to ask good questions, understand where the buyer is in terms of a process, understand what they need to get done, and has a command over the product line to where, hey, I can really help the buyer out here, right? That's what's going on. Then we have the expertise that's brought to bear. Now think about this from the buyer's perspective. Buyer wants the rep to be an expert, right? Buyer doesn't just want to come in and place the order. Buyer wants the rep to ask good questions. Buyer wants the rep to deliver insight because, sometimes the right purchase is no purchase at all. So it's not like we're just trying to sling equipment at people. The point is we want to make sure that the rep knows how to navigate that conversation with the buyer in order to deliver a sound recommendation at the back end of that conversation. So that's really what we're looking for. But the percentage of that that's happening is just really, really low. And one of the ways that we know that the reps don't really have a super high product knowledge is something else unfortunate that happens. And I hear about this all the time. So here's the manufacturer over here. All right, I'm going to say manufacturer. And here is the distributor rep. And then over here is the customer, buyer, etc. So what happens either during the selling process or even after the sale, once the purchase is closed, is that the customer is going to have questions, right? Is going to have questions for the distributor. Now, if the distributor is unable to answer those questions, what happens? Well, one of two things. Either the distributor then turns around and calls the manufacturer and says, hey, I'm getting questions. I don't know the answer to these. Can you please help me out here? And then the manufacturer educates the distributor. Or, and this is happening a lot recently, I'm finding out in conversations, the dealer or distributor just tells the customer, hey, customer, I don't know the answer to that. You need to call the manufacturer. Now, both of these are non-ideal. I mean, the only silver lining of any of this is that the customer, the buyer, is ultimately going to get questions answered. So maybe that's good. But it's not a good use of everybody's time. It certainly doesn't indicate that the rep has any level of expertise or really knowledge that's being brought to bear to the situation. And so, generally speaking, we want to reduce the number of questions that customers have to direct at the manufacturer. We want to reduce the number of times that the distributor rep has to call up the manufacturer and ask questions. And what we want to do instead is we want to make it so that the distributor rep can answer those questions, become more of the expert. And so that really, in the bottom line of things here is what we're trying to do. We want to increase the percentage of reps that are high performing. So if you're at 5%, we want to get you to 10%. If you're at 10%, we want to get you to 15. If you're at 15, we want to get you to 20. If you're at 20, we want to get you higher than that. Which means a couple of things. We need a standard for what high performance means. We have to be able to measure that, and we have to be able to track and improve it over time. So those are sort of the initial points and kind of arguments for the key thing we're trying to achieve, which is making the distributor effective in the moment. Now we're going to look at some of the ways that friction occurs and what stops them from being able to do that. So first, let's take a look at some obstacles. So in terms of obstacles, what are the obstacles to preparing reps for these conversations? Well, there's many, right? There's the fact that the reps, except for with a couple of very, very large manufacturers, are non-captive, meaning they're selling multiple brands, they're selling many product lines. And so, that means that they're not selling just one manufacturer. They're not just selling one line of equipment. So they have a very diversified set of products, and that creates challenges in terms of knowledge. There's also the mindshare obstacle, which is a little bit different from the non-captive argument, because mindshare is just really about who do they think of first, right? Who is occupying mindshare in their mind. And so they will typically resort, the reps will, to selling what they've sold the most of in the past, right? Which is not what we want. We want them to be thinking of right solution for the situation of the buyer, answering questions, providing insight, asking more questions as opposed to just pushing information. There's also distance. I mean, a lot of the manufacturers that I talk to and work with have, international, global, distribution footprints. It's very challenging to overcome the fundamental difficulties presented by just the big distances, communication, everything like that. There's also just time. I mean, I know a lot of manufacturers that try to go out and visit their distributors as much as possible, but again, there's only so much time, there's only so much money we have for tools to try to enable and so forth. So there's a litany of obstacles that we have to try to overcome when we say, all right, there's friction here in a lot of different ways, and it's kind of grinding our distribution process to a halt. And really, those are some of the key obstacles that come up. So I'm gonna redraw this here. Another question that I ask manufacturers a lot is, how long, speaking of friction, how long does it take you to onboard a new rep, to get a new rep up to speed? Because reps, there are some networks that I talk to some manufacturers, they have a lot of stability in their distribution network, but typically there's some turnover, especially with the younger reps, especially with the ones who aren't successful. They don't feel confident, they don't, make the money that they were expecting, et cetera. And so they turn over, and there's new reps that are coming in, and, in any organization, it's probably healthy to have a little bit of turnover. And so with those new reps, how do you get them up to speed? We just looked at some of the obstacles. It's difficult to deliver training over distances. They're trying to learn a whole bunch of different products. There's the mind share issue. They don't have enough time and so forth. So let's talk about time right now. From time zero, right? When somebody starts, so we're just going to go with, we're going to say 0. Okay, that's day 0 or day 1, when somebody begins at your company as a distributor. So typically what happens is when they start off, they get enrolled in some kind of a classroom program, or they get some kind of initial training, and so there's usually kind of a bit of a bump up where they get some knowledge, and maybe they can retain some of that because they're getting, they're kind of drinking from the fire hose. But then once they get through that, it starts to plateau a little bit, right? Maybe they continue to learn a little bit, but not a lot of it's reinforced. Some of it gets forgotten. They learn a little bit of it on the job. Maybe there's sort of 2 big training sessions throughout the year indicated by these vertical lines. So as they get to the middle of the year, and then there's the big training meeting, and then they sort of get another bump up, and then they kind of plateau and forget some of that. And then finally at the end of there's another training and they kind of bump up. And at the end of all of that, what are we left with? A bit of a question mark, because we don't know. How do we measure it? What's the standard? How do we actually know how much they know? I mean, other than simply the anecdotal, what percentage of your reps have high product knowledge and are high performing, we don't generally have a good way to measure that product knowledge. And so we just kind of are left with question marks and anecdotes, And then what happens is there's some time that is the amount of time that it takes to onboard somebody. And this can be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. For some very large, complicated products, I mean, I've heard 24 months or more before somebody can truly ever get up to speed in a real way. And so what we're trying to figure out here is, well, is there a different model? Is there a different model that's possible? One that doesn't go for the same kind of classroom instruction and lack of reinforcement, and it just kind of feels a little bit random and squirrely and all over the place. And the answer is yes, it is possible. So modern methods, right, which we would consider to be, involved in things like being able to learn from anywhere, go at your own speed, be able to have constant reinforcement and engagement of knowledge and so forth, right? Being able to learn interactively and visually. What we've seen in our work is that with reinforcement and with all of those techniques that I just mentioned, there is a very different learning curve that looks more like this. And what happens is the reps can actually get up to speed in half the time versus the other method, right? So half the time. So 6 becomes 3 months, 12 becomes 6 months, 24 months becomes 12 months, or even less. And it's because with reinforcement, with on-demand training, with the ability to go at your own speed, you can start fast and you don't lose the knowledge, you can retain it. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for an opportunity to significantly reduce the friction of training by cutting the time to on-ramp new dealers in half. Now, we have an ROI calculator on our website that actually goes into some detail about just how much money this directly translates into, because if you have people, first of all, there are benefits because they're going to be more confident, they're going to be, they're going to turn over less. We see evidence of that, but also just they are going to get up to quota or whatever you expect them to sell faster, and that's what we want. So that's a huge way to reduce friction, is to invert the paradigm of learning. To make it much more effective and retained. And so just a quick example from our past, when we built the Freightliner sales tool back in, it was about 2010, the iPad had just come out, Freightliner was launching a new truck. We all kind of agreed, we agreed with them, hey, we'll help you create an iPad-based selling tool that turned out to be very visual and very engaging. This is a screenshot from it. You can see once you open it up, it's obvious whether it's on highway, medium duty, severe, natural gas. You simply tap on the product line that you want to take a look at. You can look at features and benefits. Oh, here's documents. Here's calculators. It's just so clear. Here's some features and benefits. Oh, we're looking into a particular Cascadia. This is on highway, right? So we can look at different packages. It's interactive, it's visual. We can look at sort of general features and benefits down here, and selling points. We can go inside the cab of the truck. And what was really interesting and honestly a bit surprising was that it was this type of educational tool, a sales training tool, that really translated into the reps being able to onboard in half the time. That was one of the major pieces of feedback we got after we launched this, and it was out there for a little while, was Freightliner coming back and saying, it's taking us less than half the time to train our reps. And it turned out that simply having a new mode, a new model of training was the key thing there. And so let's just unpack here for a few minutes some of the reasons that represents a totally new way of training your distributors as opposed to the past. So let's just take a look at a few of these. So there's the old way and the new way, right? So old over here and new over here, right? So the old way, first of all, is delayed, right? So maybe you have a new rep start and you have to tell them, oh, well, our next classroom training is in a month and a half. So just kind of, do your best to get up to speed. Here's a 3-ring binder. There's some kind of a delay in that gratification. Co-location, right? You have to go to a specific place for the training, or you have to be in a classroom, or you have to do this and that in order to get educated. It's structured. It's classic education. It's structured by somebody as, hey, here's the order in which we're going to go through things. People have different learning styles. People have different learning speeds. Ideally, all education should be kind of personalized down to the one-to-one level, but it's generally just pretty structured in a non-personalized way. And ultimately, it's kind of flat. Falls flat. It's a lot of documents. Now, of course, hands-on training is great. That should still continue, right? Actually interacting with the products, feeling them, operating them, and so forth. Can't get rid of that. But a lot of the other stuff in terms of the classroom training really feels kind of old and antiquated. So what are we looking at new? Well, instead of delayed, we're talking about instant, where people can access learning instantly instead of having to wait. Instead of having to be co-located and be in a classroom or be somewhere to get the learning, they can do it from anywhere. Instead of it being structured, it's going to be self-directed, so that people can go at their own rate, they can learn at their own speed. And finally, it's going to be interactive, because one of the reasons that hands-on training is so useful, and why doing a thing is such an effective way of learning it, is because of the way our brains and just as humans, how we work, right? Mirror neurons, we see things done, or we learn by doing, we handle things. Well, that's why interactive learning is so important, because even if you're in an app or you're in some kind of a tool, if you're interacting, that deepens the learning and it solidifies it in a very powerful way. So the best visual example that I can offer, right, between these two. So if we're looking at the we're looking at the old, okay, delayed, we don't like that, it wastes time. Co-located, wastes time and is inconvenient. Excessively structured, doesn't accommodate the individual learning styles. And flat, not enjoyable, not entertaining, not as sticky as far as that goes with the people who are learning. Whereas instant saves us so much time and cuts out a lot of the lag from anywhere, is extremely convenient. Self-directed honors individual learning styles, and interactive is a much more powerful and reinforced way to learn. So the classic examples are, the old way. If I can draw this here, is, there's some places, right, that when you first start out, they give you a 3-ring binder, right? And it's just a stack of 600 pages or whatever, and there's images and things, and it's kind of like, well, that feels old. The generational shift, younger people don't want a 3-ring binder. That's what they say. They don't want a 3-ring binder. Instead, they want an app, right? They want something on a mobile device that they can have with them at all times, that they can interact with, that can reinforce learning. This is the way. And so, people say no to 3-ring binders, and they say, yes, can you please give me a mobile app that I can look at in my own time? So that's kind of the old way versus the new way of distributor training. And this is a new model that we developed that basically goes into, the concepts in terms of a Venn diagram here of training and tools and process, all 3 of which must be present if you are going to succeed in training your reps, reducing friction, and getting them to the level of product knowledge where they can behave and perform like experts in front of real buyers and customers. Because what happens is, and again, here's some of the symptoms of friction. Okay, with training, the symptoms of friction that you're going to experience are long training cycles and reps acting like order takers. You know, if your training is not on point, if you're following more of an old model instead of a new model, if it's not reinforced and so forth, the training is going to take twice as long as it should. They're going to behave like order takers in front of customers. Whereas when your training is on point, when you're delivering it in that new way, you're going to have a ramp up that's twice as fast. You're going to have consistent training results, and you're going to have a far improved customer experience in terms of the tools that you use, right? So the training tools themselves and the tools that you provide to your sellers, to your reps, what do they have in front of customers? Do they have printed documents? Maybe there's a dealer portal or there's an email, but good luck to them having that in the moment when they're talking to the customer. Again, if they don't have the right tools, then there's going to be a lot of calls to the manufacturer asking questions for basic information. Sales cycles will be elongated unnecessarily and unacceptably, whereas when your tools are on point, your reps will be able to get information themselves. They'll become self-sufficient. They won't have as many calls into the manufacturer, either from them or from the customer, and shorter sales cycles, which will dramatically improve customer satisfaction. Buyers want faster sales cycles. And then finally, when we look at process and having our sales process on point, if our process is not figured out, if it's not defined even, then what we're going to have is we are going to have a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty. Where are we? What are we doing? What's happening here, right? If you don't have a process for sales, then you don't really have any way to optimize what you're doing. You don't have a way to improve it. And that's not where you want to be. Instead, you want to be where you have measurement of your sales process and predictability, right? Where you have your leading and lagging indicators and you know where things are going to go. Now, when you combine effectiveness in training and tools, you can think of it maybe as an LMS or a learning management system. Training and process combine to create effective onboarding strategies. Tools and process combine to create effective playbooks. And when you put it all together as we have, you have BAM, which is our mobile distributor sales enablement platform. Now, when we talk about frictionless distributor sales enablement, we have worked with many customers over many years, the last 10 to 13 years, creating a set of tools that are available via mobile app to make it very, very easy to understand products. So imagine, these are screenshots from our mobile app. Imagine having a rep that can log in, maybe just starting, maybe they're in their training process, and they can just easily see and grasp comparisons between products. Of course, brochures, because yes, there's information in there and we didn't create it for no reason. We want our reps to have access to the brochures. But interactive products, right? Being able to look at the entire product line visually. Hey, this is what our products look like, right? And then going into a specific product. These are the features and benefits of this particular unit. And then, of course, other tools available, such as being able to, share information with the customer via email, being able to calculate things, whether it's a converter or it's a configurator, whether it's a payment calculator, finance calculator, right? Very, very easy, or even comparing two products head to head. So ultimately, what we have learned over the past decade plus, working with a lot of major manufacturers and their dealer and distributor networks, is that the most effective way to reduce friction cost effectively is to automate a lot of these processes by leveraging something that has changed in the world, which is everybody nearly has a smartphone. Now, you could argue, hey, we still have a bunch of reps, and this is true. Many sales networks, distributor networks, dealers, are still, in that older demographic. Maybe they're not comfortable with an app. They don't want to use an app. They want to continue to do things in a bit of an old school way. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But everyone acknowledges the generational shift that's happening, right? Those individuals that don't want to go anywhere near an app, they are nearing retirement age, right? They are getting older. They're going to leave the workforce sometime in the next probably 5 to 10 years. And we already see an inflow, like onrushing of these younger reps that are coming in, and they're very inexperienced. They do not know the industry. And there's two issues here, right? Number one, we simply don't have the time, nor do they have the wherewithal at all to work in the industry for the next 30 years to build up that knowledge the way the last generations did. They don't have the patience. The world has changed. And when they come in, you give them a 3-ring binder, they say, no, thank you. Where is the mobile app? So we have to look at both what's happening in the world with technology, with the ever presence, the ubiquity of mobile apps and mobile devices now. Everybody's on them all the time, and it's the most convenient way to access information. And simultaneously, it's also the most efficient way to deliver information to the reps. And so it's kind of a synthesis of multiple things, and we can really take advantage of that by delivering the right kind of mobile app. Now, in a cost-effective package. I mean, the last thing anybody wants is to think about, oh, hey, we're gonna build a mobile app from scratch, and it's going to take 6 to 12 months, and then of course when it is ultimately delivered, it's not what they want, and they have to keep going back to the developer every time they want a small change. And it's expensive, somewhere in the range of $100,000 to $150,000 minimum, if it's a highly functional app. So those are some points of friction too, and it's why we built BAM as a ready-made, out-of-the-box product. Now there are customizations that are available; those are important. Companies want their branding on the app, right? You'd rather have it be, for example, the Acme app as opposed to the BAM app, right? So, we brand it, we white label it for our customers. But also, it's so out of the box and so ready to deliver that it can be snapped into place really quickly, and then it's just a matter of getting the content sorted out and then getting it out to the dealers and distributors. And again, anybody who's under, let's say, 45 years old is gonna use the app. Right? They're going to use it. They're going to adopt it. And then over time, that's going to be a really critical way to actually transfer tribal knowledge from the older reps that are getting near retirement age. I mean, how are you going to capture the priceless knowledge that they have in their heads and get it to the younger reps who are coming in? Well, there are a lot of ways that we're using with customers. One of them is very simply to go get those experienced reps, and shoot some videos with them real quick, right? Like ask them for the top, what are the top 5 to 10, things that you've learned about selling these products in your career that you want to transfer. Take a video, put it into the app. Now the younger reps have it, and it becomes an efficient way to transfer that knowledge. Finally, just one more thing I think could be helpful, because we've started to use this in our own work, is a tool called the Onboarder. Because even if you do use a really good and capable interactive mobile training tool with all the modern conveniences that we've talked about, it's still really important to make sure that you are able to quantify and measure what your new reps are learning. And so simply using a sheet like this, which is available on the Sandler website, just Google, Onboarder Sandler, and you'll be able to find a blank template of this. Is with the new reps, what's important to master, right? Are there particular, feature and benefit learnings? You need to know a basic minimum about all these products. Then perhaps it gets into the slightly more more nuanced or advanced about, hey, here's some industry applications, here's some things you need to know about our competitors, and then finally, and then sort of basic competency, intermediate level competency, and then ultimately sort of like, you are a certified sales professional, you have expertise in our products, right? It's very, very helpful to be able to measure and deploy a tool like this. So that is, very much what we're talking about. So that is about it for the presentation today. I would just really encourage everyone to review the new model, take a look at this, think about the synergies between training tools and process, and how that can help to reduce friction and create more knowledgeable, capable, sellers in your, dealer and distributor network. So with that, I am going to just tackle a couple of quick questions that have come up during the presentation. So I will answer those quickly, and then if there are no more, we can wrap it up. So let's take a look and see what questions came up. Okay, so do you offer single sign-on? Okay, that's a specific technical question. Yes, it's actually on our near-term roadmap. We're in the process. I got this question several times at ConExpo. The idea being that, in this day and age, when your reps already maybe have, logins to maybe the dealer portal and to maybe another app and to something else, is there a way to just to leverage single sign-on so that they can log into BAM with that same set of credentials? And yeah, it's on the one hand, I see the value of that for the individual user. So we are looking into, deploying single sign-on in the next couple of months. On the other hand, I would say that the way that BAM is set up, you only really need to log in once, and then on your device with your access credentials, it just remembers the password. So I don't know that it's that big of a deal with our app, but yes, single sign-on is coming. Okay, one more question. Actually, I want to bring up another question that I got when I was at ConExpo. So I was talking to a great company. They do electric compactor machines, and I got the question when I was at their booth. Hey, we've set up a lot of great content on the website with our product and our product information. Is there a way to get that into the BAM mobile app via API or something like that, so that there can be a kind of a transfer back and forth? And so again, kind of a two-part answer. The short answer is yes, that is possible. APIs do exist to transfer data such as that. But secondly, the app exists on its own pretty much, right? It's got to have slightly different content. Now you can leverage content from the website very easily, and there are lots of ways to do that. But generally, the app represents an opportunity to organize content a little bit differently and set things up in just a little bit of a different way than you might have on your website to make it more appropriate for a mobile setting. So yes, APIs are possible to do a transfer, but it's always good to look at that and make sure that it's the best idea before proceeding with that. Okay, another question. How long does it take to roll out? So great question. It depends on a couple of things. It depends upon how you want to go with your dealer network, how much content you have, or distributor network, and just a couple of things like that. But in terms of getting the initial instance stood up, getting it branded, that only takes a couple of weeks. And then from there, content can start going in. We help with that too. We have a service for helping to get content into the system and to create some of those interactive assets, the builders, the comparisons, the interactive products, the navigators, really powerful stuff. Creates kind of those mini, learning management, modules for your reps, the very powerful stuff. But yeah, all of that really I mean, even in the most extreme examples, it's generally not taken more than a couple of months, and often goes faster than that. So looks like we have run out of questions. So that is about where we're going to land today. I really appreciate everybody's time. Went a little bit long, so went to about 45 minutes, but I appreciate your time and attention. If you have any questions, please let me know. I will send out a recording. There were some people that weren't able to make it today, so I'll send out the recording to everybody, both by email and on LinkedIn. And I appreciate those of you that were able to make it today. I know a lot of people. I know some people are still tearing down their booths in ConExpo with some of those big, those really big equipment, machines that were there. Some of our customers. So appreciate your time and attention. Look forward to following up with you later if desired. And hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.